Hello and welcome back to my studio. I'm Gina, and in today's video I'm going to have a go at redressing a miniature doll. This is in 1/12 scale, and I bought this doll and she is dressed in a very Victorian type of outfit, which actually would have gone really well into the apothecary build. But I really had in the back of my mind, what else could I do with this? And I've really kind of been going down this avenue for sort of a steampunk vibe, and I really wanted to have a go at seeing if I could redress her in more of a, well, still Victorian, but really having that steampunk kind of feel to it. So this has been quite an experiment for me, and I've never done this before, but I really wanted to give it a go just to sort of test to see whether I could actually do it, put my sewing skills to the test. They're a little bit rusty, I have to say. So I'm really keen to see how this is all going to turn out. So come along on this journey with me and let's get started. So here she is, and the first step is to remove all of the bits that she's got on her, the umbrella, the hat, left a bit of glue, but we can deal with that a bit later, and then also her dress. So to make the corset, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try this. I'm not too sure if it's going to work or not, but I'm just going to use a bit of cling film wrap and just wrap that around her bodice. And then with some strips of tape, I've just used painter's tape here, I'm just going to go through and tape up all of the details and the shape of her body. That will give me the opportunity to create a bit of a pattern. So once I've removed that, I'm just going to take this marker and mark down the middle and then both sides, and then I'm going to cut those or mark those pieces into half again. So all up, I'll have 8 pieces altogether. Once they're all cut out, I'm just going to use a really thin leather material. I'm not too sure if it's actually fabric. It feels like it's a bit of a faux leather or faux suede. And why I'm using this is because I know that I don't need to fold over the edges. And then to start with putting it all together, I'm just using a bit of fabric wrapped around her middle. Now this is going to add some strength to it, and because it's going to be one continuous piece right through the middle of the corset, so as I pull it tight, it will mean that I'm actually just pulling through on that fabric and not pulling all the individual pieces of the corset apart. And I'm just using some tacky glue just to fix those into place. Moving on to the hat, I'm just using some black cardstock to create it, and I've just taken a rough shape. I've got no idea whether this is going to be the right size or not, but at least this will give me a starting point, and this is basically the brim of the hat. So once the crown of the hat, I think that's what it's called, is done, I'm just going to take a really sharp craft knife and just cut segments out of the middle. So I'm actually not cutting anything away from the middle of the brim of the hat, because I'm going to fold these up and glue them to the inside of the actual hat piece itself. So once that's in place, I can start shaping the sides of the hat. And actually, as I start doing this, I realize that the brim is actually far too big. So that's one of the benefits of doing this. This way is having too much material is not a bad thing, because it's easy enough to cut away what you don't need. And then once I've cut that down, it looks like I'm cutting a lot away, but actually it comes together really nicely. So now I'm happy with the proportions of the hat. I'm going to move on and create the goggles that are going to sit on the front of it. And I've just taken a paper straw and actually cut those just two pieces. Roughly, I just eyeballed the width of them. That seems around about right. And just painted those up before I use some UV resin for the internal lens part. So I'm just adding one drop, it literally was one drop, into each one of those lenses, and then we can start pulling this together. So while the lenses are curing for a little bit longer, I'm going to move on to adding some details, some buckle details onto the front of the corset. So these are some leftover pieces from a previous project. They're just cut out of a bit of cardstock, and I've just used my Cricut maker to be able to cut them down this small, although you could use just a craft knife very carefully to cut out the size, and then just using some strips of the same leather fabric of the corset, and I'm just threading those through and then just placing them onto the just to the front of the corset, and this is just going to add a little bit more detail. Now the lenses have cured a bit more, and we can start pulling these together to make them look more like goggles. So I'm just adding a nose or bridge piece in there, and then a couple of lengths of the basically the same leather type fabric or material for either side to add basically the straps of the goggles. And then once those are sort of set for a little bit, then I can push them both together. And there we go, they're done. As the corset's made out of a faux suede fabric, I'm just going over with a layer of Mod Podge for two reasons. One is going to give me the sheen and look of leather, and the second is that that layer of glue is just going to help keep it all together. To create the skirt, what I need to do first is actually create a bit of a pattern. So I just took a couple of measurements off the doll itself, and then I'm transferring those out onto a piece of white paper, and then creating a sort of an off circle. So what I want is the skirt to be longer at the back and then shorter at the front, and I'm just using some black fabric. I think this was actually an old pillowcase, to be honest, so it's nice and soft and it's reasonably thin, so it's not too bulky. So I just cut some strips and gathered those up, and now I'm just attaching those as a frill around the bottom of the skirt. So I'm adding some gathers to a little bit to the front and to the side of the skirt. This is actually going to help with the shaping of it. Once I've got it fitted to the doll, then I can go back through and start adding in some more stitches and some more gathers and really starting to pull it together into the shape that I'm looking for. The aim here is to just use fabric and stitching to build out the shape of the skirt, and I'm really trying to avoid using any type of glue to actually pull it into the shape that I'm looking for. For the blouse, I'm keeping it really simple. I'm cutting out this T shape, and then I'm just going to stitch around basically the side and underneath the arm, and then I'm going to cut a piece across the top to create the neckline. And that's it. Once I've got it onto the doll, I'm going to gather a little bit around the top so that it looks like it's kind of gathered. And then I can move on to adding some of the details. So I'm just going to create this shoulder piece, and like all of the patterns I've created so far, I'm using the doll as the guide and cutting it out of the same fabric as the corset, and I'm cutting this out into two pieces, and then I'll glue those together and then add some embellishments to it as well. using a bit of foam board here to create a little pocket detail or little bag detail, and then I'm just using again the same fabric as the corset so that we've got some consistency going on, and just cutting a little V at the front and then basically gluing that around the piece of foam board, and then gluing that onto a bit of a strap so that I'll, once it's all dry, I can wrap that around her waist. For one arm, I'm going to create some additional detail with this wrap that's going to go around it, and I'm going to use the same details that we've got on the corset just to bring the two pieces together. So just with some straps and a buckle, and also I'm using a piece of embroidery thread just through the middle there, and then I'm going to use that to wrap the piece onto the doll. And then also just the same sort of embellishments that I've used for the shoulder piece, and then I'm going to coat the whole thing with Mod Podge. To lace up the corset at the back, I'm just using a needle and thread, so it's a double layer of black cotton, and I'm just going to weave that backwards and forwards and then pull it tight and then tie it off at the bottom. I debated on whether to use embroidery thread or anything like that, but felt that this was the better scale to go with. For her shoes, what I'm doing here is actually just going to paint in some boots. I did debate whether to try and make these, but I didn't really want them to be the feature. I just wanted them to basically disappear into the whole look of the doll. And I've gone over with this with just a little bit of Mod Podge, just trying to find a way that I can get the paint to stick, because it's sort of a glaze on top of the porcelain. And then I'm just adding in some little details for the boots, and then one final detail, I just get a single thread of embroidery cotton. So embroidery thread has about 6 threads in it, and I'm just creating some little bows for the shoelaces, and that's it. That's all I'm going to do for the boots. And there we have it, she's all done, and she's turned out so much better than what I thought. I was really impressed with the actual doll itself. She had some really nice figure on her, which actually made all of the work pulling the fabric together, getting it to fold nicely, getting the whole look, actually made that life so much easier. And just adding all those little details, it really did pull it together. And I'm really happy with how it's turned out. So if you've liked this video, please consider hitting that like button. It really does make a difference to the channel. So thank you again to all of my subscribers. I really appreciate all of your support. It is really making such a difference to the channel and really making me push myself outside my comfort zone. I keep saying this, but it is absolutely true. You know, if I can learn something new that's going to add value to any one of my subscribers, that you can take something away and inspires you, or that you've learned something that you can put into your own project, then that is absolutely the goal that I'm trying to reach. So you guys are all amazing and I really appreciate your support. If you haven't done so already, consider hitting that subscribe button, turn that bell notification on so you get notified when I upload the next video. I've also added a couple more videos at the end that I think that you might enjoy, and until next time, I will see you then.